Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. This episode's featured author is Pauli Pedersen. Pauli Pedersen and her husband live on Fox Island in Washington State. Between the majestic Olympic mountain range to the west and Mount Rainier to the east, they are surrounded by waters of the Puget Sound and visited occasionally by deer under the apple tree, a raccoon on the prowl, or an eagle gliding over nearby Honeymoon Bay. An active life of teaching, raising 5 charming children, and performing as a classical singer gave way to the opportunity to indulge her love of words. With a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and an indefatigable spirit, she finds wonder in her family history. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me, I have Pauli Pedersen. Pauli, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you, with the nice weather.
The weather is beautiful. So we're here to talk about your book. What is the title of your book?
My title is River of Dementia, a memoir.
And can you tell us a little bit about it? I know it's a memoir, but what exactly are you pertaining to?
Well, in the late 90s or mid 90s, we found out my dad had dementia. And so our family went clear through that adventure. And I really wanted to write about it because it's so like other people. So many people are caring for a loved one who changes. And also, I had just a plethora of stories, family stories. So I started working on it, worked on it for a long time, and finally came out with the book.
Nice. How long did you spend working on it?
After my dad passed away, I waited a few years, and then I started writing some things down, and then more. And then I thought, I better get serious about this. So I wrote a few chapters. Then I realized that if I was going to do this, I needed to kind of make my mark with my family, or all of the things, the busy things that you do. So I took a class, and I took a class from Elizabeth Murray. She started, and that kind of told the people around me that I was serious about this and that I needed to carve out some time, because I thought I would be given time at some point in my life. Well, you're not given time. No, you have to take the time.
Yeah.
So with this, I was able to start and write, and people took me seriously. And then it took a few more years of doing that until we had COVID. And I thought, well, I'm quite far along on this, but if I don't get this finished, I might be gone, and there would be all my stories, my family lore and everything. So I worked really hard during COVID and got it finished in 2021, probably.
Nice. Yeah, I've met a lot of people who are COVID authors.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It was a good time to write.
It was. That's when I got a lot of my stuff done too. I started prior to late 2020, but it all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I guess I'm gonna work on this harder now because I have nowhere else to go when I'm not working. So let's make this happen.
Yeah.
So what was that turning point? What inspired you to say, I'm going to turn this into a book?
I think I always wanted to make it into a book, but I didn't realize what I had there. So it was a matter of organizing it. And when I first began, I had planned to do past, present. And so I kind of wrote each chapter separately. And then when I began really putting it together, I realized that no, it was going to just have to be chronological.
Yeah.
So I had to then try to I had to organize, keep the chapters one following another. That's it just kind of turned into a book.
It's definitely a book, and it's a very charming book too. And it's honestly, you could almost put it as a historical, because a lot of what you talk about in there, I didn't get to finish the whole thing because it's actually, there's a lot of family history in there.
There is
a lot of family history. I was like, okay, it'll be like you said, kind of back and forth with present day, or the present time you were speaking of with your father going through dementia, and then his past. Go back and forth. So you kind of see the good, and then where he became, what happened later.
Yeah.
But definitely, it ran through so much. It was really cool because I love history, especially local history.
Yeah.
It's neat. You have a lot of cool pictures in there of the family, of the area. So it was really neat if I like local history, Kitsap history, there's
Mhm.
quite a bit in there. So I mean, we're talking late 1800s to all the way up to the mid 90s.
Yes, actually, my grandfather was born in 1865, and he was a part of our lives.
Yeah.
He
Oh my
lived so
gosh.
long that he was 77 when I was born, and I didn't know he had another life. He just was
Yeah.
he lived with us, so I was really lucky.
Oh man.
Um,
Yeah, that's pretty rare nowadays. Oh my
oh yeah, yeah,
goodness.
and he was very intelligent and upbeat till the end.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great. That's
yeah.
excellent. So for just to cover our basis, for those who may not be familiar with dementia, maybe they've heard of Alzheimer's, but not dementia. Can you explain a little bit on what dementia is?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Dementia is the umbrella under which brain and mental diseases falls. Alzheimer's, as I understand, has a slow progression. You kind of plateau and then you go down, then you plateau again, and then you keep going down. Dementia can be many forms. People don't forget as much with dementia. They do forget. My case, dad really acted out. I think he became psychotic, and it had to do with brain mitochondria or something. I can't remember the brain batteries
Okay.
blowing. And so they blew in his paranoid area,
Oh
and we
no.
got quite a ride.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Can only imagine. Actually, are you okay if I wanted to mention real fast when I so you sent me the book and it's very well done. But of course I turned it over like I always do to read the back. And the first, paragraph and change just kind of grabbed me. I'm like, oh my gosh, some stuff happened. Do you mind if I read a little bit for everybody to hear?
I'd love to have you read
Okay.
it.
So this is her book blurb that she puts. I'll probably just read the first part. All right, here we go. As the butcher knife flew from Dad's hand through the air, I visualized it slicing into the back of the retreating social worker. Like a banty rooster, my dad stood on the back stoop, preening with power. What happened to the kind, light-hearted gentleman whose strong faith had grounded him for 80 years? That's quite a turn. That's quite a turn. He goes from, because I've read through and he just seemed like this very charming, funny, kind of quirky guy. I mean, most guys are quirky, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And to throwing butcher knives at social workers. I mean, that's a vast change.
It
So
was very new to us too.
I imagine because
Yeah.
yeah, because
No,
reading through, he was there was no anger or really anything. He was just a very even keel guy. It seemed like.
he was, and he kind of changed abruptly. I think he had changed a long time before, but he was able to cover it, and with my mom's help, because in the book I tell what a what a wonderful husband he was to her, and she so appreciated it. She did not want to give him away,
Yeah.
so she wanted to help him hide,
Well,
and she
yeah.
did that well.
Mhm. Pride is a hard thing to admit to let go, and what from what I gathered, he kind of swooped in and saved her as her Prince Charming when they were younger when they met.
Yes,
Can you
yeah,
can you
that meant all the world to her.
had a not so supportive family and he just kind of was like he was there to
Yeah, he
yeah.
was her Prince Charming, and she lived in a family that didn't care about her very much.
Oh, it's
And he
terrible.
came in and he cared about her so much that through their whole lives, I say it was a fairy tale, sort of. They had some bad things happen, but they maintained this wonderful, loving relationship.
People like to idolize marriage as this perfect thing, and it's like it is a relationship, it's a partnership between two people, and it takes work and hard things happen, and you have to be resilient in compromise, in talk, and to
Oh,
make it
yes.
happen because it's not perfect. It's hard sometimes. Yeah.
No, things happened, things went on that they had to work through, and they worked through them together. My sister's death really, I think, undid my dad. My
Yeah.
mother made it through, but he said somehow he felt responsible for her.
No.
And when he couldn't cure her or get her cured, I think that kind of sent him over the edge.
Yeah.
We didn't know it at the time
Yeah.
because they kept it, but yes.
And guys are such problem solvers if they can't fix something, it really bothers them. And then if it's a child, that's a whole other element there that's just beyond control. I mean, you're out of control. The issue is out of control, and it's a loved one. It's a tragic situation. It's what all it is.
It was, and he was a father that really needed control. He wanted to take such good care of his children and make
Yeah.
sure that their lives were happy.
Right.
And that he couldn't fix this. I think like I said, I think it really affected him.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So the title is interesting, and I couldn't quite pin it down. River of Dementia. Can you explain what that means?
Well, as I wrote it, I kept using these phrases and realizing that it was like a float. It was like a slide down the hill and right into a flowing stream that he couldn't control. And in the beginning of the book, I needed a poem, or I needed something. So many books start with quotes or poems, and I couldn't find anything. So I wrote a poem, a metaphor for that slide of his. And it talks about starting the mountain as a little trickle and trickling down the mountain, and all the things he passes. He goes through a lake, this little trickle, and ends up in the ocean. And that's how his journey was. He would just float quietly for a while, and then he'd get out in the current, and there would be rapids and whirlpools, and that's just what it was like. So
Yeah.
that's how I got the river, and
Okay.
dementia was there.
Oh man, when was the first time that you noticed, you kind of started questioning his, mental integrity?
Well, I knew he was a quirky person, so we'd always just put it off to, oh, that's dad, But one time, mother and dad came to visit us, and they stayed in our guest room. And when they left, I kept smelling bananas in the guest room. And I thought, this is really odd. I've never smelled bananas in our guest room before. And after a week or so, I decided to go back in the closet. And I went back under everything in the closet. And in the very far corner, I found 2 bananas. So he'd been saving the bananas in the closet. And I knew there was something the matter there. And you kind of read about people who stick things away and tuck things away. And that was the first time I really had to deal with it, that there was something wrong. He wasn't just quirky. People who are quirky don't hide bananas in closets. So
I don't know. That sounds like something my family would do just as a joke.
Yeah, no,
You know,
he was a joker, but not that kind.
well, I've had people say, just take a piece of fish and then you kind of put it in like a, this is really mean. Put it, in a thing of tinfoil and then put it up like in a rafter somewhere. No one can find it. And then it just reeks like dead fish for 2 weeks.
Right. There's a joke about that, and it was a divorce, and the woman put one in the curtain rod, and the man who brought his new girlfriend in couldn't find the smell, and they finally gave the house back to the wife. But I thought that was a good joke. So it happens.
That's funny. Yeah, that what I was referred to there was apparently people did that with in the shops in my old work. They would do that just because they would leave. They either not get fired, but they'd leave different
Yes.
job, and they'd leave something gross because the people around them were just driving themselves crazy. And like, well, I'm leaving and I can't bug you anymore.
Right.
So this fish will do that justice for 2 weeks.
No, Dad was just trying to save his bananas.
Yeah. Okay. Bananas are precious cargo, I guess.
They are. Yes. And he forgot them.
And he forgot them. Well, I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
I've done such a good job of putting stuff away that I can't find it again.
Yeah. Don't we all? Yeah.
Yeah. Where was that thing? I did such a good job of storing it that it's gone now. Oh my goodness. So now, are there going to be any more books in the future, memoir related, or maybe different genre?
They won't be memoir related. I shot my wad on that, all of it. But I do have a wonderful workshop group, and I needed something else to write because I didn't want to stop my workshop. So I just played with a mystery, and I don't know if you know Carl Hyacin, how he writes.
Don't.
He's a very funny writer from Florida. He's a columnist for the Miami Herald, I think, and he runs into so many strange people, and he puts them in a book, and you just can't wait to see what they're going to do. So my newest venture is to take two bumbling brothers who are trying to kill someone who's inheriting money that they would really like. And so that's my odyssey there. And then I've started kind of a second book to follow that.
Okay.
But I'm like you. Um, I have little books,
Mhm.
and it's not too long, but it comes across the way I want it to. So I thought I'd better do two little books so that I can get them published. But
There you go.
that's where I'm aiming.
I like that. Yeah, two little books are good. I like novellas are fabulous. My first one was great. It's about 325 pages. My second one's going to be closer to 500 or 600 pages.
Ooh,
It's so much work.
yeah,
Little books are nice because you're like, I can get this done in less than a year or a year. That's
right,
awesome.
right,
Big books
exactly.
take longer.
Oh, way longer.
So long, and I don't like that. They're
No,
fine, but you know how it goes.
they're fun to
Now
read.
they are fun to read. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like as you can get things done faster, and then other ones are just you want a heartier meal, you go through the bigger book. But
Yep.
it depends on your mood sometimes too.
Yeah, the kind of big books are when you finish, you wonder what the people are doing. You would like to be with them longer.
Yeah,
You know them so well.
yeah, I know. It's almost like a buddy. Like, but I can't call you and talk to you about stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, I'm curious with a lot of people when they write memoirs or write stories in general pertaining to family history will change names. Did you change names or did you use family names?
I did not change names. I
Okay.
started to write and change my husband's name because he was kind of embarrassed about being in the story. But when it ended, he was okay with it. So I did not change names, and they were relatives, and I'm on good grounds with most of my relatives.
That's good. I kind of figured that was the case because you had
Mhm.
pictures and everything. And like it's a family history, which I mean, you can pass this down for years and
Yeah.
years and years. And,
Oh, yeah.
grandkids, great grand beyond can read through and really know some cool information. Because I mean, a good chunk of it is about just growing up up here in Kitsap. Grapeview is a common
Hmm.
area. You talk about the shipyard a little bit, and it's not until later on when you really have a grasp for what home is like for you guys that you throw dementia into the
Yeah.
you bring up dementia because you didn't throw it in the mix. It
No, it
found you
came to
guys.
us.
It came to you guys. You didn't ask for it. That it shows up and you can see the drastic change in your guys' lives, or especially your
Yeah.
father's life when that happened.
Yeah.
That
The other thing was I had so many photos. I have just a treasure trove of photos. So I was awfully happy to be able to include some of those
yeah.
in my book. And I heard it was going to be very difficult publishing with photos. So I was worried. But my publisher, Blue Forge Press, is a nonprofit, and they just did it so well. They put it in with not a worry, and it worked out very well. So that made me very happy to be able to have photographs.
Interesting. Well, so what was the potential problem with photographs?
I think they're hard to work into the print,
Oh,
into
okay.
I believe that is it. I think my publisher used a different kind of, well, I'm not sure what it is, format, so that they space the sentences out. So sometimes there are gaps in between the words, but they were able to do that and get the photographs in.
Yeah.
So works
I
for me.
yeah, I mean, I thought that added a lot to it, especially especially a memoir, especially a historical. I mean, you're going back, like you said, 1865 was when your
Yeah,
great grandfather was mentioned and born. And
yeah.
you have pictures all the way back then. You want pictures. It's kind of cool to see the differences in the time frame and the area and how people lived back then. It was just a simpler time.
Yeah, I really honor the pictures because wasn't easy to get pictures, and I have a lot. People took a lot of care to send the pictures to me. I got them. So I really honor the pictures.
Yeah. Did it take quite a while to narrow down which ones you were going to put in the book?
Sort of, but
Yeah.
there's some that are just the main ones. It did because I have a lot. I have a lot. I have I have all my dad's slides, and then I have pictures from my grandfather's family,
Yeah.
the ones that are a lot older in the
Mhm.
1800s. And so, yeah, but they, some stood out.
Did you have much to do with the care of your father when he was going through dementia, or was that mostly on your mom who did a lot of that?
It was mostly on my mother. And like I told you, she hid it because she didn't want him to be embarrassed. I got literature from the Alzheimer's Association when this began, and we really weren't sure what it was. And she wouldn't read it
Yeah.
because she thought it was a betrayal to dad. And I
Yeah.
think it would have helped her a lot because she would have seen, even though it wasn't Alzheimer, there are certain stages that people go through
Right.
and on their way to death. And
Yeah.
she missed them, but she did most of the care. When he got dementia, my sisters and I rallied around her. And once he was acting out so badly, we were there a great deal of the time. And I know I walked along beside him a lot. My sisters did too, but for some reason I was more able. So I endured some of the things that were really difficult. One of the really difficult things was taking away his keys, taking away
Oh,
his driving. We all know driving is our freedom. And to him, he was born when cars were just about, and he loved driving. That
yeah.
that was his life. He loved going on trips and long trips and short trips. So when we had to take away his license, it was just heartbreaking.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it was not
terrifying.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that we dealt with that with my grandmother too. Like you're not going to be driving anymore. It's just not
No,
going to be a thing.
you'd like to let them, but they're liable to hurt other people. If they
Right.
hurt themselves, okay, they're
Yeah.
still having a good time, but they're liable to hurt others.
You hurt yourself, that's fine. Just don't hurt other
you
people.
you go out happily.
Yeah. Yeah. He died doing with what he liked to do.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's so hard. And watching your parents who used to be in charge of you and care for you, now you're caring for them, that's got to be that's got to be such a strange thing. They talk about that particular age, for yourself. You have young kids, or maybe they're getting older, they're now going and become independent, and now your
Yeah.
parents are reverting back into children to some degree because
Yeah.
their mind starts to go, body starts to go, just natural aging.
It was dad. Dad was he was thoroughly affected. Mother wasn't. She was very perky. And she ended up living until she was 93. And she was 78, I believe, when he passed away. So,
Okay.
and she did a lot of traveling. You'll have to read the epilogue in the book, because that's about my mother
Okay.
and how it ended for her. And
Yeah.
it's a happy story.
Good.
And
Yeah.
so you'll have to read that.
Yeah. It's people think death is a terrible thing. It's like, yes, it's the end of something. Endings are always sad, but sometimes it's just when we've lived a long and fruitful life,
Yeah.
it's kind of a gift, and sometimes you're in pain and suffering, and
Mhm.
or you're just darn tired.
That's right. And we're all going to go through it. So there's
Yeah.
no getting around, no
No getting
escaping.
around it. Yeah.
But we kind of confronted it. I mean, we are the confrontive type in our family, and you just have to realize that's going to happen. Other people would kind of like to maybe lay back and not think about it so much,
Yeah,
but with his
yeah.
death, we really had to. Yeah.
And I think that's the healthier way to go about it. You just have to understand it's natural. It's going to happen. You have to kind of come to grips with it and learn to accept it. It's hard.
Well, you have to do all the nice things you
Yeah.
can in
Yeah.
your life and in the family life,
Yeah.
so that you've done your best and
Yeah.
given them whatever you could.
Yep.
So that makes you feel a lot better.
It's a lot less tragic when they've lived a very healthy life and they've done great things, and no one has no regrets, but as few regrets as
No.
possible, because regrets come with just living. I made a mistake. It was a regret.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
that's what living is,
It
change.
is.
And you
It is.
learn.
Yeah, it is. We learn through pain. It's
Exactly. But
it's the truth.
yeah, yeah.
It's the
So
it's the it's the truth. So this was your first book that you published, yes?
yes.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, how will that change when you publish your next books?
It gives you a lot more confidence. I can't believe I have a book that was published.
Right.
I'm so happy about it. I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
Um, it's wonderful since it's something I always wanted to do, and then to accomplish it is amazing. So now I'm not as intimidated by the process. The process is not going to be easy, but it's not intimidating,
Yeah.
as intimidating as it was.
Hmm. Yeah. And then learning all the steps is definitely it gets more fun after you know what's coming. You're like, oh, I got to do this now. Oh, I got to do this now. If I do
Yeah,
this part, I get to the fun part, which I enjoyed the cover design. That was a big fun for me with
yeah,
along with the writing, of course. That was
yeah.
exciting too. And you mentioned you have a writers group that you're involved with.
Well, it's a workshop that
Workshop.
yeah, it came from a class, and everyone, or a few of the people in the class, not everyone, but most of them, were interested in meeting again and kind of growing together. So we started at the Gig Harbor Library, and we would meet 2 times a month, and we would read our stories and discuss them. And we had a really nice group. It included fantasy and science fiction and memoir. There was going to be a Western. And then COVID came, and I didn't want to let go of our group. So we moved to Zoom, and it worked out really well. It was
Yeah.
almost better. You miss the personal exchanges of being next to someone at the coffee shop or whatever.
Yeah.
But we were able to read the stories ahead. We would send them in early and then discuss them on Zoom. And so that went on until just recently. We're going to take a hiatus because we're down to 3 people, and we're hunting for for more who will show up every time. We have a list of people, but you have to be really dedicated to show up twice a month. And you don't
Yeah.
have to have something that you've written, but it's nice to have something that you've written. One of our members is just great. He's a wonderful writer, and but he plays golf, and he can't come all the time. He comes as much as he can, and he does the critiques with us. And they are not really critiques; they're just supposed to be helpful suggestions.
Yeah.
But yes, I love our writers group.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's healthy to have that kind of stuff, and it also kind of boosts your confidence too. I was
Oh,
talking with another author recently, and when they kind of look back on, because you always have second, you always think your stuff isn't as good as it can be, just because we
yeah.
we love to poo poo on ourselves. Like, oh, I wrote stuff, but it's terrible. Don't look at
Yeah,
it.
right.
And then you pull it out of the drawer, and you forgot you wrote it months ago, and you go, wow, this is pretty good. Pat myself on the back there. And then it helps when you get, that unbiased feedback. Hey, this is really great. I would love to see this though. It's like, oh, cool. They started with a nice compliment and they give a helpful suggestion. I like this.
And that's exactly what we try to do. We
Yeah.
try not to be critical.
Yeah.
We try to just be helpful and say, well, I don't understand this, or are
Right.
you sure you want to say that there? Or maybe it would belong, at the end or up closer to the beginning, and just suggestions.
Yeah.
And
You need that kind of camaraderie, just to throw ideas around. I mean, it can,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
inspiration can come from anywhere. I've worked on a project for years, and I was stuck. Actually, just happened recently, a couple weeks ago. I've been stuck on a couple of scenes and how I'm going to flesh this out, and just sit and talk with my wife about it. And she goes, "Why don't you do it like this?" I'm like, "Oh my goodness, why didn't I think of that? That's so obvious." And it just slapped me in the face. I'm like, "That's how I'm doing it."
Yeah.
Just opening your mouth and airing out the idea tends
Yeah.
to tends to help out.
Isn't it nice that we have partners? Because I have a partner. My husband will do that too. He will
Yeah.
help me with the editing and with ideas when I'm stuck or I
Yeah.
need a word. And they're so supportive. It really helps. It starts the process of thinking if you're stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to get someone just unstuck me. Grab
Yeah,
the grab the crowbar and unstick me.
right.
It just works great. Circling back to the topic of dementia, 'cause it's never a fun topic, but it's
No.
real life. Real life. What kind of suggestions would you give to those folks who are, where you guys were, you had a family member who was going through it? What suggestions or resources do you know of to help them make it at least a little more bearable?
Well, it's really hard to decide or to figure out what's going on. So I contacted the Alzheimer's Association, and they have wonderful literature that they will send. That helped me a lot, even though it turned out to be dementia.
Yeah.
And Alzheimer's cannot be diagnosed without an autopsy. So it's very hard. And when Dad threw that knife, he got into big legal trouble,
Oh,
and so a judge got involved, and he was put in a place where he couldn't leave without the judge's permission. And that place happened to be a nursing home in Ellensburg that was a nice, average nursing home. It was kind of old, wasn't a pleasant place that I would want to be in, and I'm sure he didn't want to be. So I was looking around and I saw an article it must have been in the News Tribune about a study that was going on at the University of Washington on Alzheimer's and dementia. And I called, and they would take him in the study. So it was a ways away. It was several months away, so he had to wait, and we had to wait with him. And luckily, we had him moved to Seattle to another place that was nicer for him. But he went through all sorts of tests and talks, and they came out telling us that it was not Alzheimer's, it was dementia. And they medicated him, which got him out of the nursing home in the judge's
okay.
purview. So that worked really well. But it's really, and at that time, because that was 1995,
Oh my goodness.
they still don't know much about Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
It's they have drugs that can help, but actually it kind of turned Dad into a zombie. He was able to be around us and be around my mother. At first, everyone was worried that he might act out on her. So we kept him near. He came to our house to live for a while. But yeah, it's new to us. We didn't know what to do. I think just get literature, read everybody's stories,
Yeah.
find scientific stuff, go to hospitals, go to doctors, take what you believe will help and ignore what you think won't. But just, get information.
All excellent. I know it's kind of a daunting task to,
Well,
especially caring for a family member who's been taking care of you or been
yeah.
independent for so long. It's just,
Well, I've found something recently that I don't know a lot about, but I'm going to become a part of if possible. It's Alts Authors, ALZAUTHORS, and they're a group of 6 women who have written dementia or Alzheimer's books, and they have a presence online of all the books. I think they have 350 Alzheimer's books in their library, or books that you can find that you can buy. And I think that would be a really good place for someone to go at this point. There was nothing like that available to us, but there are so many stories, and that's why I wrote mine. I just wanted to add, you're not alone. That's what their mantra is. You're not alone, and that's true. That's why part of why I wrote it. That was half of why I wrote it.
there's so many resources out there, and it's a bummer that there's no medicinal methods to calming it or easing it or even curing it. It just calms the body down. It doesn't really do anything for the brain. It just makes them,
No.
docile.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Now they're doing new studies, and hopefully something will come from that. But they're trying to get a grasp on exactly what happens. And there's supposed to be something coming out that might help, but it's always in the future.
Yeah, so much.
You don't realize, though, how much has occurred from the past till you have to deal with it. It's always a lot better, but it doesn't feel a lot better because it's not enough.
Hopefully they find something for it to, at least ease the symptoms. But the brain is a very complicated thing.
That's exactly right. And it's so hard on the caretakers because they love these people, but they're people they don't know anymore.
Yeah.
And they just become so different. In my mother's case, she was worshipped by him until he got this, and then he began to think she was doing things. She was hiding things from him, and so he hid them. He hid them away from her, and then he would tell my sister to go look here. This is what she's been doing, and so it was awful. It wasn't who he was. It was sad. Yeah.
And when did he finally pass away?
He finally passed away in 1995.
Okay.
No, 1996. I'm sorry.
Okay.
He, in my book, I tell about how he came back to our house after the judge let him go.
Yeah.
And once, when he was at our house, my mother built another house in Seattle near my sister's. They moved there, and Dad was in there about a week or two, and then he passed away. So he was declining. And the thing that
Mhm.
Mother didn't realize from not reading, she hadn't read the Alzheimer's information, is when you get close to death, you can't eat anymore. You can't swallow.
Yeah.
And she was trying to feed him chicken, baked chicken, dried baked chicken, he thought. And he just didn't want that baked chicken, but it was because he was dying
Uh,
and he couldn't swallow it. But she didn't know it. So she just did her best. But you
yeah.
need information. You need
Yeah.
information.
And experience, and
Uh,
sometimes shocking stories to kind of, get you
right.
motivated to find that information
She
too.
she really wanted, she took very good care of him, but
That's
food
good.
was kind of the glue that held everything together. And she wanted to be sure he had nutritious food, but it wasn't the time. It wasn't the time.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a sad but necessary thing that happens, and it's life. It's just how it's a natural progression of things.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, when you are, all done with writing your books, you're like, you can lay back and relax and go, I've done a lot of writing. I'm happy now. What are you wanting others to have learned from your book?
Well, before that, let me tell you that sometimes I don't get to the end of the day and stop writing. I have the most wonderful schedule and ability because I am retired, but I use Google Docs and I use a mini iPad.
Yeah.
So I can take that anywhere with me. I actually can write on my phone. I can do
Yeah.
it on the computer. I can do it on the iPad. I can sit in my bed and listen to music and write. So sometimes I end up writing into the night.
Nice.
and, or yeah, I can just have any schedule I want.
That's great.
And that allows me, if I'm at the doctor's office and they're going to keep me for a long time, or if I'm waiting for somebody, I just sit down and I write a little bit more. It's really easy.
That's
So,
great.
but what I want them to learn from that first, that you have to take the time to do it. Even though I meet so many people that would be great writers and they have great stories, they just don't take the time. And one way to take the time is to go to a class, any class, should something about writing,
Yeah.
um, and carve out your time so people understand you're serious about it, and then you don't have to try so much to convince them.
Uh,
You're on your way, you're doing it. Also, that there's so much interesting history in families,
yeah.
and quite often it is around dementia. Just write. If you feel like writing, write. Writing is such a joy for me. I'm sure it's a joy for you too.
When I get time.
Yeah, see, I have made my times, so I
Yeah,
can have it whenever I want it.
you
And
can.
but that's a luxury. That is a
It is.
luxury. That's why I didn't, start writing earlier, is because I had a large family, and that's what I did.
Yeah. You had
Oh,
5 kiddos?
I did.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
were busy.
I still do.
Yeah, yeah, they're still around.
Yeah,
They are raising themselves now.
yeah, they're
They're
out
probably
raising
raising their
others.
own kids.
Yeah, they
So
are. Yeah, so and I always wanted to, but there was no time to sit down. I could not take any time to do that. Now I can take the time. So
and you know what? You're not alone. I interview a lot of people, and majority of them are people who no longer have a job because they're
yeah,
retired or their kids are older and they are doing their own thing, and they do have time because it just takes lots of time and energy to knock stories out and research and write. It just does. So
I wish I had been able to start a long time ago, because I think you develop so much as you go along.
yeah.
I would have been a lot more developed than I am now, but I'm on the road, and that's good. So, and
Yeah.
I read a lot. That's another thing too. I've always read a lot. I read while I'm writing, and I get so many good ideas. Do you read while you're writing?
Yeah, a little bit. It depends on how deep into the story I am, because sometimes I want to change up like I want better vocabulary, and sometimes different authors have stellar vocabulary that I didn't even know existed. And so I find it, I write the word down, and then I put a little, put a little note, and I put the definition of that word. And then if I'm stuck on something, I'll go through my little notebook and go, "Ooh, that's a good one. How do I fit that to this?" And
Yeah.
it
You
kind of
had
it
good
adds the
words.
yeah.
You
What's
had
that?
you had good words in your story.
Thank you, thank you.
You did.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate it. Yeah, I try to
yeah.
invigorate, that kind of stuff. So I do a little bit of reading, but mostly when I'm like dedicated to writing, I try to keep it just a little bit, because I find that I don't want other authors' voices in my head
Yeah.
as I write, because that can be challenging for me at least.
Well, it's been very wonderful for me because when I was writing the memoir, I read other memoirs, and there were some really good ones about dementia, and that really helped. But also, no matter what I'm writing, when I'm reading, you just get ideas.
Yeah,
You get ways of looking at things or coming at them, or it's so helpful to writing to keep reading and not just read, you know, historical fiction, which I would love, and that's not what I just read,
right.
but other things, because it helps you grow.
Yeah, I always thought about it too. Like when I was writing these books, I'm like, well, life is not just dragons and beasts and fighting and magic. It's not that. It's not just those. It's how do you interact with people? Where do you go get food? How do you do this? How do you encapsulate a scene? What the scenery looks like? How do you deal with conflict? Not just like fighting, but actual like interpersonal conflict. How do you deal with that? It's not just
No,
that genre. And so
the
when
story. It's
the
not just
story,
the story.
right, it is multifaceted, just like life is. So
Yeah.
read across the board. Like I love reading horror, I love reading mystery, I love reading science fiction, I love reading memoirs like yours, I love reading nonfiction. And I feel like if people need to branch out, because I know a lot of people who pigeonhole themselves into just reading
Yeah.
one genre. It's like, that's great,
Yeah.
read other stuff
It's
too.
okay. Well, it depends too on why you're reading. If you want to go on a vacation because your life is really hard, then
Yeah,
you have to pick something that takes you on a vacation. If you want to learn something
yeah,
about the harsh realities of life, you have to go that direction. But
exactly,
I like
exactly.
to take vacations, adventures.
Yes, I do too. I do too.
Uh,
So, speaking of taking adventures, to read your book, where can people get a copy of your book?
well, I'm just so excited because getting it published was really exciting, but the kind of ultimate thing is being on Amazon.
Yeah.
And Amazon is liable to take over the world someday, but
Um,
it's so great to be on Amazon and to have people be able to get it easily. And also, it's at Barnes and Noble. So it is
Great.
at a bookstore. You can walk right in and get it. It's also on Google, and I'm sure other places. So that's
Excellent.
exciting.
Fabulous. Oh yeah, it's extremely exciting. So exciting. Well, Polly, this has been really nice. I really appreciate you coming on here chatting about your family, dementia. And it's come out not a hard subject not an easy subject, excuse me, to talk about. The hard subject to talk about, not an easy subject to talk about. So I appreciate your candidness and your willingness to share. It's very inspiring.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me and being
Yeah.
able to talk about my book, because my book is precious to me, and getting to share it is really special. So
It
thank
really
you.
is. My pleasure. Absolutely. And when you do get your other books off the ground and they're moving, looking like they're being, publishing very, very soon, hopefully very soon, we can do another one of these lovely interviews and you can talk about those ones, which would be cool too. So
That would be great. You are an easy person to have an interview with.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I try to make it simple and fun because life can be hard and complicated, and we need some breaks every now and then.
That's right. You are great.
Oh, thank you. You are pretty good yourself.
Well, you made it easy.
That's good. Well, again,
Uh,
thank you very much. Everyone, I hope you had a great time having a conversation with us, listening in. Go get her book, check it out. It's got some awesome historical pictures. It talks in depth about dementia and how it can affect life, but it's a lot of heartwarming stories with with her and her family. And I'm sure you guys can relate. So go out and get that awesome book and have a wonderful day. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading. Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.